Hi, everyone. This is Charlotte Voisey here to talk to you today about ambassadorship. It's a fabulous career in the bar industry, one that has brought me much joy and success. So it is my honor and privilege to talk to you about the topic today. Just to let you know what I'll be covering, I'm going to talk about my own journey, how I got to become a brand ambassador and why I decided to do that. I'll talk about my career path up to my current position today. And then we'll talk a little bit about the role itself, what makes a great brand ambassador, what we look for in an ambassador in terms of personal qualities and skills and experience. We'll go through best parts of the job, not so best parts of the job, what it really entails, a bit of a reality check, and then what we look for and when hiring brand ambassadors. So I'm going to take some questions as well as we go along. So I'd like to start off then by talking about my brief sort of journey in the career and how I got to take the position of brand ambassador, which was 10 years ago. So I've always been in hospitality. When I left school, my first job was as a waitress in an Italian restaurant in the town I grew up in. And immediately I loved the pace, the energy, the social aspect of working in hospitality. It really suited me, how I like to be and my skills as a person. I went to university and studied international hospitality management. So there you go again. And was fortunate enough within my degree to spend a year in industry where I worked in Spain and Argentina, thus picking up Spanish as a second language, and got the opportunity to run restaurants, run bars, and through the training program work in every single discipline of a restaurant. So from kitchen to front of house to the bar specifically to overall management. My very first bar shift was actually in 1996. I was 18 at the time, for any of you out there who are trying to figure out how old I am. Remember, this is the UK. You can bartend a little younger than you can in the US. So that was my very first bar shift. But really my true cocktail bar experience came later on from 2002 to 2006 in London when I was part of Apartments 195, a cutting edge cocktail bar at the time, no longer with us. So I had about 4 years kind of true, constant, hardcore bartender experience until the ambassador position came up. So I was approached by William Grant & Sons while I was still in London. They were one of my favorite suppliers. We had a good relationship, and they suggested this idea that I might want to move to America and join them in the capacity of a brand ambassador. It sounded wonderful. It sounded like the opportunity to stay in the industry that I loved, to use the skills that I had gained, to keep the contacts and even build on them, and all the while to travel and explore a new country and open myself up to hundreds of new opportunities. I didn't say yes overnight. It took a while. It was a big decision, but I eventually agreed and moved over in June of 2006. So I'm coming up on 10 years now with William Grant & Sons and 10 years in the capacity of brand ambassador. One of the reasons I chose to make the change is something that I hear a lot from bartenders and ambassadors, and it's this idea of, while we love bartending, we know that it's a very physical job and it can be antisocial in terms of hours that you keep. So this is a great way to stay in the industry you love, share education, share your experiences, but maybe keep a more sane kind of lifestyle, which I'll get to in a second because that wasn't necessarily the case. But at least it allows you to sort of shift disciplines within the same industry. So that was one of the reasons that it appealed to me as well. But it was particularly the travel and the move overseas that probably clinched the deal for me because it aligned with my personal objectives. It was something that I wanted to do, experience more of the world through my career. So that's really why I decided to be a brand ambassador. Now, the second most important part of the decision is who you decide to go work for. William Grant & Sons, for me, had always been a company with great people, a company built on history and heritage and fantastic liquids. Their single malts are second to none. And then more specifically, Hendrick's gin had just come out. I'd maybe met Hendrick's a year or so before. It appealed to me. It was different enough that it was exciting. I liked the kind of events that they had been doing already in London, and I could see myself aligning with the personality of the brand. And this is really, truly important. We believe, I believe, many people believe that a brand ambassador is the life version or the brand embodiment in real life of a brand. So you have to really gel with the brand, the way it feels, the way it looks, the kind of personality it would have if it were human would be you. And I felt that with Hendrick. So it all felt right. And I made the move, like I said, about 10 years ago. So I started off with, actually on the Scotch side, I was Glenfiddich brand ambassador for about 6 months before I moved on to Hendrick's, worked on Hendrick's for 2 or 3 years. And it remains the brand that most people know me for, which hopefully says that I did a good job, or at least got around a bit. I want to say in the early sort of 3 or 4 years of my brand ambassador career, I traveled all of the time. People would ask me, what's the percentage of time you travel, or how many nights away? Those that are brand ambassadors know that you never have time to sit down and actually count. It felt like a lot. It felt like constantly. It was probably 75% or so. When you have the right sort of life set up, when you have the right energy levels, when age is on your side, it is arguably the best job in the world to have. You can travel, you don't have to sort of answer to anyone, get home by a certain time. You can truly just be everywhere, always, and meet just the tremendous amount of people that are in this industry. And that's exactly what happened to me in the first 2 or 3 years of my career. And this was when the industry was at a different stage. The industry was younger. There were fewer people really doing cocktail work. There were fewer people to meet and greet. So when you dropped into Las Vegas, you know, the 5 or 6 great people in that city would all come out and meet you for dinner. When you went to LA, it was the same, or Portland, or Miami. Even in New York, you would sort of bump into the movers and shakers all of the time. That's something that's changed a little bit now with so many more people in the industry, which is fabulous and great. I feel like there's fewer moments to really sort of sit down for dinner with some of your great friends in the industry. So it's a slightly different landscape now. But anyhow, the point I was making is when you're young or starting out, there's a need for you to travel a lot, meet as many people as you can, do as many events as you can to really get your name out there, but more importantly, to promote the brand you're working on. And that will change depending on the life cycle of the brand, and different sort of depends on how old the brand is and how well known it is. But at the time, Hendrick's was relatively new in the US. The idea of using a cucumber in a gin and tonic, let alone a cocktail, was absurd. People just, you know, would humor me and explain that that's not how things were done here. So it took a lot of hustling, and you need to be set up and excited to do that. It was tremendously rewarding, and I look back and think now, sometimes even the smallest event where you think, should I really be here? Is this really worth my time? Everything leads to something. So if you have the energy and you have the availability, sort of go hard when you're starting out, because it really, really will pay back in all due time. After Hendrick's, I moved on to be a portfolio ambassador, which meant 2 things. One, I got to work across all of the brands in our portfolio, which was a great thing. And the second thing was I started to be a mentor for the new brand ambassadors that came through with William Grant and Sons. If you look at our program, we had 3 ambassadors when I joined, all for Glenfiddich. Now, 10 years later, we have 25 ambassadors across every brand in our portfolio. So as a program, as an idea, as a concept, the brand ambassador program has absolutely grown. So there was a need for somebody to take kind of a semi-leadership role, not a management role. The brand ambassadors would report into their line managers, which would be their brand managers. But I was there as, I guess, a big sister, or just kind of someone that had the empathy. I've been there, I've done that. I understand what's hard. I understand what you probably can do, what you can't do. And slowly but surely, we were able to build a team. And for any of you that know some of my colleagues, fellow ambassadors at William Grant and Sons, you know that we've built a really special and fabulous team. And I'll get into talking about the kind of things that we look for in character in a brand ambassador in just a second. So I'm going to continue now and talk a little bit about why bartenders specifically make great brand ambassadors. A lot of the brand ambassadors we all know come from the bar. Not all of them, and I can make the case either way for who you should recruit or what kind of person should be looking for a brand ambassador role. But bartenders do tend to make great brand ambassadors, and there's a few reasons why. The first one, I think, if you think of the role of a bartender, multitasking is so important. the ability or the capacity to do many things at once, hand-eye coordination when you're talking to somebody but furiously making cocktails, or when you're talking to somebody having a light-hearted conversation but watching a potentially dangerous situation arise in the corner, thinking always about temperature, light, music while you're making drinks, how long people are waiting for, being very courteous with people while being furiously disciplined and helpful to your colleagues. Is just a lot of multitasking. And a good fast bartender is a hell of a multitasker, whether they know it subconsciously or whether that's a very sort of calculated training program. One of the things you need as a brand ambassador is the ability to multitask. Sometimes you need to do 100 things at once. They're all priorities. They were all due yesterday, and likely you'll be on a plane or in a taxi or without Wi-Fi when you have to do all of these tasks. So multitasking really is a very important part of being a brand ambassador, and it's one of the reasons that bartenders make great brand ambassadors. The other thing is that I've come to see is this idea of treating your guests in the bar, meaning they can all be quite different, but you have to sort of read the guests, understand why they've come into your bar and how you can help them. And again, it's not a case of going over and saying, hello, why are you here? How can I help you? It's just that intuition, understanding or reading a guest when they want to talk, when they don't, when they need help with a cocktail, if they want to come for a good time with a group, if they want local information, if they're a tourist. Reading your audience is a key skill of a bartender that will determine whether people sort of come back and see you or not. It just sets the tone. As a brand ambassador, we speak to many different audiences. Reading the audience and giving them what they need or what they want or what is helpful to them is the key to success on how to be a great brand ambassador. And no two groups are the same. Talking to bartenders, talking to distributor salespeople, talking to regular consumers or regular people who like to make cocktails at home, three very different audiences. And then when you come to talk to the press or the media, again, a very different audience. So reading the audience, understanding why they're talking to you, what they need, what you can give them that's helpful to them is very, very key, all the while keeping your own agenda in mind. So what is the purpose of your communication to them? Because usually you would like them to do something for you as well. So transmitting all of those things is very, very important. And again, it's a similar skill, the bartender to the guest. When you're a brand ambassador, you have your guests too. It just now happens to be everyone. Another reason I think why passionate bartenders make great brand ambassadors is this commitment to knowledge and education and understanding. Sometimes we'll hire a great bartender brand ambassador, and then some colleagues in the marketing department will say, right, we need to get this person up to speed on the gin category or the vodka category, or we need to give them some education. And I always think, yeah, absolutely we do, but let's not forget that most passionate bartenders know their category. They know production. They have a wonderful sort of wealth of knowledge because they care and they study and they're dedicated to this art. Obviously, we have to go a little bit more in depth in our brands and the way that we like to communicate them. But when you get a really rounded, well-educated bartender, you've got the credibility, you've got an expert in the field of spirits or a specific category, and it just gives you a great head start, because credibility is one of those key characteristics that you can't really train, you certainly can't buy. It's appreciated by all of the audiences. So we look for bartenders, again, that have a kind of wide breadth of knowledge. It is also an indication that you truly care about your craft. And true passion will carry you through longer. It'll carry you through the harder or difficult times. And again, it's picked up on and really appreciated by every audience. So that's another reason why bartenders can make great brand ambassadors. And then lastly, bartenders, I think, if I can remember, it's been a while, bartenders are used to kind of having a plan, but then anything could happen. So this idea of routine, bartenders aren't married to routine. It's that old cliche of you're expecting a slow night on a Sunday and then you get hit and you just dig deep and handle it. You may not have the mise en place set up in the bar. You may only have one station open and 300 people walk in. You find a way to figure it out. So it's being spontaneous, being able to deal with crises, reacting calmly under pressure, kind of being ready for anything at all times. Again, it's one thing that a bartender has to handle, has no choice. and it's something that a good brand ambassador should also be set up for. Because as much as we plan for a long time for some of the big events, guaranteed on the day, different things will happen, things don't arrive, mistakes happen, accidents happen, anything can happen. So being able to think on your feet is probably one of the number one skills really in life, but particularly in our industry for both a bartender and a brand ambassador. So these are some of the reasons that we prefer, or like to, I should say, go to bartenders as a resource for brand ambassadors. And some of the best brand ambassadors we all know came from behind the bar. But that's not to say that only bartenders can make great brand ambassadors. I would be remiss and in a lot of trouble if that was the message I was giving right now. Not at all. And of course, bartenders can also bring some problems or sort of frustrations to the role. For a lot of bartenders, this could be the first kind of time in a corporate environment. So there's definitely a cultural change. It's the same as moving country. There's different behaviors, different norms, different language, literally, and just different ways of doing things. Plus, you're automatically put in a new environment with usually quite a large empathy gap when it comes to your colleagues and the people that you're working with. If you've never been a brand ambassador, it's kind of difficult to empathize with what the full story looks like. And no one truly ever gets to see 360 what a brand ambassador does. And that's another reason that my role is so important, because I can kind of pitch in and speak up and explain the rest of the picture to some of my colleagues in the office when it comes to being a brand ambassador and what it really truly entails. It's common to sort of hear, oh, your job looks so glamorous, and wow, that trip to Iceland looked like so much fun. I can't believe it was called a work trip. You know, and now we get to talk about the role of social media, which is very important and actually a very strategic part of our job. It's also a lovely release. We get to share all the wonderful things we're doing. And it's not always bragging. If you think about when something great happens in your life, you kind of want to stand up and tell someone because you're excited and you want to share. And this is a lot of the stuff that we do on social media. How it's perceived, of course, could be very positive, or it could be perceived with frustration, jealousy, negativity, just depending on the audience. So it's always something to be quite mindful of. Of course, ambassadors are never going to sort of social media post around, I'm sitting at home on my weekend again doing my expenses, or hey, I just missed a train, so I'm going to be in this train station for another 3 hours. It doesn't really make for great viewing. So of course, we only post the highlights, we only post the fun, interesting, great things that happen. We share other people's successes, we celebrate the industry. So what you see often, if you're not a brand ambassador, you never see 360 degrees of what it really takes. You probably only see that tip of the iceberg, which is all the fun stuff. So that's just something to sort of keep in mind as well. So when bartenders come over as well, one of the key things that I certainly went through, didn't take me long to get over it. Some people it takes a little longer, but when you work for a brand or a company, that's kind of your new world. And you will be excluded from certain industry parties or events or treats or perks or trips that you used to get invited on as an independent bartender. And yes, you can suffer from FOMO in the beginning, but of course you have this wonderful new job with this wonderful new world and collection of events that you're about to go ahead and enjoy and create. So the trade-off is absolutely worth it, but you need to be ready for it. When you're an independent bartender, you are perceived in a very different way by everyone from the industry than you are when you move over to be a brand ambassador. And again, as long as you handle yourself with integrity and professionalism, and you're always courteous and respectful to everyone else in the industry, you'll be just fine and you'll keep your respect and everyone will enjoy your new contribution to the industry. But you have to understand that you have a different role. Therefore, you are excluded from certain things, which some people like and some people sort of don't. Lastly, I think anyone who is applying to be a brand ambassador or thinking about it, whether you've come from a bartender background or not, another key thing is you need to be a self-starter. There are brand plans and there are programs and there are events and there are ideas and there are meetings and suggestions and a lot of people to help you along the way. But ultimately, it's a position that you can totally take and run with it. And the success that you have as a brand ambassador, I believe truly from my experience, is ultimately up to you in terms of how you kind of grasp the reins and run with it. The reason that brands hire you to be their brand ambassador is because they've come to believe that you are the missing link. You complete their brand package, if you will. You complete the sort of marketing mix. So if you have ideas, if you have relationships, if you have events that you want to create, break the mold, go after new ideas, it's exactly what you should do. Now, I'm very fortunate because the company I work for is exceptionally proud of the ambassador program and give us a lot of freedom to act on our ideas. They encourage this idea of entrepreneurial spirit. That's William Grant and Sons and their approach to ambassadors. Not all companies are the same, I would imagine. So again, if you're looking to jump into this field of work, it's definitely worth doing some research on the company's approach to brand ambassadorship. And if you are a self-starter, creative thinker, entrepreneur that really likes to sort of run with things, make sure that the company's focus is aligned and the company's ideals match yours. Otherwise, you could be frustrated and you could be wondering, how comes those brand ambassadors are so happy and always joyful and I'm feeling trapped or frustrated. One thing with the progression of the brand ambassador category is that not all brand ambassador roles are the same. It can be very, very different. The title now has been used quite broadly. Again, 10 years ago, there weren't that many brand ambassadors. Nowadays, the title is used a lot, and it spans a variety of different roles and responsibilities. So you need to really understand the back end, behind the scenes, in terms of what you're expected to do, what levels of freedom you're given, how you can really exercise your creativity. Otherwise, you might be frustrated and things might not work out so well. You should also look into things like compensation, salary, benefits, package, security, meaning sort of job security, your contract, how it's all shaped up. Because again, every company is different. You could be working directly for the brand, for the distillery, for the supplier. You could be working for a marketing agency. You could be on a sort of self-employed contract. There's many ways to do this now. So make sure whichever way you're signing up for works for you and your work-life balance. Okay, multitasking is crucial indeed. Why did you choose to become a brand ambassador? I think I covered that in the beginning. Again, loved the industry, didn't want to leave it, but was ready for a new challenge and was ready to stop physically bartending all of the time because, I intend to continue growing old gracefully. Quick question from John. Hi, Jonathan. About social media. Yep, so I mentioned social media a little bit in terms of it's an important tool for us. It's something that is, I guess, still relatively new when it comes to marketing for liquor brands and brand ambassadors. It's something that we discuss a lot. I have my own Facebook page, my own Instagram and Twitter account, although I don't tweet very often. Each of them is in my name, and I use that to reflect mostly work, but sometimes personal travel as well. Within our team, some of the other ambassadors will have a brand-specific page. So you might have, for example, Jaime Salas Milagro Tequila, and he'll use that to post solely about work-related issues. So whether it's travel, cocktails, news about Milagro Tequila, and then he'll have his own Facebook page where he can, be himself with his friends, maybe a little freer just to discuss whatever he wishes. So we're quite open, we're quite liberal when it comes to how brand ambassadors should use social media. It's a fine line. There's a big gray area there in terms of, do you have to be always on for social media? And the answer to that question, I believe, is if you are a brand ambassador, you kind of are always on. You can't sort of sit at home and it's Sunday night, so I'm going to go ahead and rant on Facebook about politics. It's one of those golden rules that we never discuss religion or politics at the bar. And as a brand ambassador, it's just an extension of that. So I think you always have to be mindful of the fact that once you're a brand ambassador, you are always on. So any channels of communication, especially social media these days, should be treated with care. It's not saying that you lose your freedom of speech, and it's possibly just one of the slight sort of cons, if you were, that in terms of pros and cons, that you lose a touch of freedom if you're a brand ambassador because you always are representing your brand. the company you work for, and in my case, the family that you work for. So you just have to be a little bit respectful there. But social media is important. We actually have part of our objectives, our KPIs, our key performance indicators for the year, include growing our social media followers. So you can follow me on Instagram, Charlotte HDO Voisey. Just joking, sort of. We actually get bonused on our numbers now. But it's important that we do use those channels to communicate our brands with the public, because that's the important sort of news channel in this day and age. It's what people enjoy seeing, especially with Instagram, the visuals, whether it's a great cocktail photo or a visual of the distillery itself or different colorful events that we're doing. It really helps bring the brand to life. So we are very active on social media. We are encouraged to do so. We at William Grant & Sons encourage a personal tone and a genuine tone, but always being careful and respectful, and remembering that you're representing something other than yourself. I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about the best part of the job. So a few years ago, we did one of those shit brand ambassadors say videos, and Eric Castro had the best line, best part of the job or the travel, worst part of the job or the travel. And it's kind of true. In a nutshell, that's kind of the case that it is. But the best part of this job is everything you get to do, every place you go to travel, every person you meet, every event, every creative idea that comes to life. You literally get to do things you would never do otherwise. I always think of it kind of as having this backstage pass to the world, depending on how lucky you are and where you get to travel to. I complete 10 years in June, and it is my sort of mission at the moment to have traveled to every 50 states by June 19th. I have 5 to go. I only know of Tim Herlihy, who recently visited all 50 in 30 days ahead of St. Patrick's Day, our Tullamore Dew ambassador. I know that Tim's done it. I'm not sure of anyone else who's done it, certainly in my close circles. I know that Carl McHugh is trying to do it, but I'm going to beat him. Anyhow, if you had told me, 10 years ago that I was going to move to America and visit every single part of this vast country, I mean, it just sounds like a dream opportunity. And that's exactly what I've had. And it's not just travel, it's the quality and the access of things that I've done. It's the people I've met also within the industry, but also, meeting Sean Connery in my underwear backstage when I was part of a catwalk show, a fashion show in New York a few years back. It's serving Robert De Niro his Hendricks with a cucumber because he insisted on it at Sundance Film Festival a few years back. It's those moments and those things that you would never normally get to do. You have this unique position, much like a bartender does, as I always remember when you bartend in private parties or you're in a room. People kind of sometimes forget that the bartender is there and is human and can hear and listen to things. It's the same when you're guest bartending at these events. You have this unparalleled sort of trusted position and this access to seeing and hearing and experiencing things that you honestly couldn't get anywhere else in the world. So that for me has been the biggest perk. The travel, the exposure, opening my eyes to things. I mean, granted, some of the places I've been, I would never go back to, but mostly I would. And mostly I really appreciate all of the travel I've had. At the end of the day, being in this world, we're very lucky. Cocktails and spirits, it's usually in a very positive environment. We're usually in a mode of celebration for whatever the event is. It's either educational or it's celebrational, and those are two very exciting and instantly rewarding places or areas to work in. So the best part of the job, like I said, it's kind of everything. Second to that, I would say specifically for me and what I've been able to do, it's seeing your ideas come to life. Every year at Tales of the Cocktail, when we plan this big party that we have on the Wednesday night, the welcome party, which I hope to see you all at in July, these are ideas that we have. These are things we noodle down on a napkin sometimes in a bar, or think of in the shower, or in some cases dream of, and somehow they all come together and you walk into this beautiful party and those are your ideas up there, and when you see people come in and enjoy and see the look on their faces and and speak nicely of the event afterwards. There's an amazing rewarding feeling when you can be responsible for something so much fun like that. So that would be my second sort of big thing. Best part of the job, being able to be creative and seeing your ideas come to life and seeing people enjoy them. It's that same feeling you get as when you're a bartender and you make a cocktail, you put it in front of someone and you sneak that first glance at their face, because their facial reaction says everything. You can go over there and ask them how the drink was and they'll usually say, yeah, it's great. But when you see that smile or that look of delight on their face, whether you've made them a drink or whether you've just put on this amazing party at Tales of the Cocktail. So those are my two favorite things that I've been able to achieve as a brand ambassador. Oh, say hi to Porco Lounge in Cleveland, Ohio. I really enjoyed your bar when I visited, was it last year? Yeah, great tiki lounge. If anyone's passing through Cleveland, you must check out Porco Lounge. So worst part of the job, yeah, probably all the travel. On a serious note, whether you view it as time spent on airplanes, I'm fortunate enough that I'm kind of a easy size that I can sleep well on planes. I'm not too long or too wide that it's uncomfortable for me. But nonetheless, sleeping and sitting on airplanes with the recycled air and what it can do for your body isn't great. You could view that. You could also see it as time away from home, which is a more poignant part of being a brand ambassador, whether you're in a relationship and or married and or have children, or even if you're just by yourself. Time away from your home and your kind of zen or sanctuary can put pressure on you and can put pressure on relationships and can put pressure on your health. So that's probably the hardest part of the job to balance. And early on, I adopted this sort of trinity of sleep, diet, and exercise. And that's, I think, why I've lasted so long as a brand ambassador. For now, anyway, fingers crossed. You have to look after yourself. You have to know your limits, and you have to know what it takes to look after yourself in order to overcome what is the worst part of the job, which is the travel, the time away from home, or just the hours in general. Even if you are regionally based and don't travel very much, just the onslaught of requests and workload from many different directions that come through in no particular order. You're tasked to prioritize, to keep everyone happy, to somehow get everything done, to perhaps push back, learn to say no, but then deal with the repercussions. Again, the analogy works for a bartender as well. Everything kind of hits you at once and you need to figure it all out. Brand ambassadors are notorious for working every hour God sends. You name it, we've been up doing something or traveling somewhere at every hour on any day of any week in any year. It's part of the territory. Again, you need to be able to handle that. You don't necessarily get time off in lieu. I'll just leave that one there. So that's probably the worst part. It's the risk to your work-life balance. It's the risk to your ability to take care of yourself, have a routine in your personal life. That's in jeopardy once you take a job like this. It's not impossible and it's completely in your control, but it's very, very difficult to do. And the more experience you have, the easier it becomes. And the more tenure you have with one company, the easier it becomes, because you build up trust and loyalty and there's an appreciation. When you start out, it's harder to do because you want to prove yourself. There's a lot of work to do to get a brand up and running, or to get your association with a brand up and running. But it's absolutely paramount to be able to enjoy the job, to do it very well, to enjoy your life, which is obviously crucial, and also to be able to stay in the job as long as you want to. Much like bartenders tend to burn out and want to look for another role, like perhaps a brand ambassador, the same thing happens here too. So I'm coming up on 10 years as a brand ambassador, and actually recently my role changed. I'm now Director of Brand Advocacy, which means I look after our ambassador program as well as PR for the whole company. And this allows me to, once again, stay exactly where I am in terms of in the industry I love, in the company I love, with the brands that I love. But it stretches me. There's a new challenge. I'm now overseeing PR, which is a new field for me. But I also get to look after the ambassador program still, which is what I love to do. It's my passion. This makes me slightly more office-based with slightly less travel, although anyone following me on Facebook this year would argue with that. I'm working on it still. But that allows me, again, to just sort of travel less, spend a bit more time at home or a bit more time for myself, however I want to spend that. So in the same way that you progress from a bartender into something that's a little more convenient for your lifestyle, if you're clever after a tenure in brand ambassadorship, you want to start to look ahead and see what opportunities there are for you to stay in this field, but perhaps modify your work-life balance so that it works for you again. Like I said, I'm still trying to grow old gracefully. And this is such a wonderful industry that I wouldn't want to leave, but you need to find a way to continue at a pace that works for you. And everyone's very, very different. I require a lot of sleep, healthy food, and a lot of exercise to feel good, to feel alive, to have the energy to do my job, most importantly. If I fail on any one of those three things, I become not very good at my job very quickly. So I learned early on that I have to prioritize those. And sometimes it means leaving parties early or saying no to things, or choosing an easy, safer, lower maintenance path, which can be less exciting, but it keeps you in the role longer. So you have to know yourself. It also helps if you are immune to peer pressure, which is easy to say. I've had a good ride through my career when it comes to peer pressure. I don't really dabble in it very much. I know it's a lot harder for some people, but if you can truly put yourself first, you will last longer, be more effective, and ultimately enjoy the role a little bit more. So here's one from Zach. So what sort of organizational methods do you employ to keep you and your team organized, both in your ambassadorship and your time in bars? Yeah, so I look after our team now. It's a great question. We have a few sort of gatherings throughout the year. We have an annual conference, which this year was held in Iceland, lucky us. We also have monthly calls, frequent check-ins on a less formal basis, and of course our big gathering at Tales of the Cocktail where all my team are present. I think organizational methods, so we connect a lot, we discuss topics together, we share best practice, which is so key. Often if you are one brand ambassador on one brand, you can feel quite alone, especially, you know, we don't all, the ambassadors don't work from offices, they're remote employees, which means they work from home, they come into the office sometimes, but there's no routine, there's no sort of regular structure to every day or week because it always changes. So we make the effort to meet in person or on the phone on a monthly basis or meet as a team as often as we can to discuss things. Sharing common problems and how people have solved problems is a key part of that. So a lot of discussion. It also promotes this idea that we are a team, a brand ambassador team. And while someone who works on Montelobos Mezcal might have a completely different world to someone who works on the Balvenie single malt scotch, they have a lot in common when it comes to how to organize their professional lives, the demands on their time. So we definitely pull together as a discipline, as a function, and discuss those kind of things a lot. It's also important, I think, to get together and reward and celebrate success together, which we do very well a lot. Constant communication then really in its various forms is how we do that. On the back end, some less glamorous ideas, you know, we have an online calendar where all of the ambassadors can upload their events so that we can see who's doing what at any one time. So there's some of us are traveling to the same city, we might not have known that someone else will be there. So again, it's another element of support, and we can get together, maybe co-host events together or just support each other, or hit bars and restaurants together and just expand our networking. So that's probably another organizational method that we have is the shared calendar. And then I think we're all friends on Facebook and various social medias, so that helps everyone sort of keep in touch. So hopefully that's answered your question there. When it comes to time in bars, again, it's been a while, but definitely sort of monthly or weekly meetings. Type in the bar, it's very different. You have a sort of very specific schedule in terms of work that needs to be done to open a bar, to close a bar, and then weekly meetings to discuss anything that's come up in terms of ways of working or customer or guest requests or menu items or mise en place, that kind of thing. Chris Patino asking a question for a friend. How about I send you an email afterwards, Chris? And then let's see, a question from someone who's just starting out at a small craft distillery. Sounds good. So it's a new brand without sort of major funds. Any advice on helping build the brand or expand a brand on a budget? Yeah, so this is where you really need to use your personality, your relationships, your contacts, which you can do without spending a lot of money. Sometimes it's the art of networking. Honestly, for the first sort of 2 and 3 years that I was doing this, I was almost everywhere at once. You just get into conversations, you'll get your photograph, your brand mentioned into magazines, just organically things start to flow. So just try and attend as much as you can. That doesn't involve too much expensive travel. Work with the relationships you have, sort of leverage mutually beneficial relationships where you can perhaps provide product or just education in exchange for being present in front of as many audiences as you can. There's a lot you can do without having to spend a lot of money on sponsorship fees and sort of traveling around the place all of the time. Also, social media is essentially free, so you can make a lot of use of that. Watch what's happening on Facebook, look for trends, see where you can be helpful and add value. Sort of become known as an expert in your field, and journalists will automatically start gravitating towards you for advice and input on their articles. And so the more you can build your profile as a knowledgeable expert, your brand comes along with it. So anything like that you can do, that's certainly what I did in the early days on Hendrick's Gin. We probably had more of a budget than you have now. I don't know. Who knows? I don't think either of us will disclose that. But again, in the early days, it was all about making connections, relationships, shaking hands, knowing people, and being there for them, being helpful. I saw another Gary Regan quote the other day on Facebook, and I think, 90% of being successful is being easy to work with. So be one of those people that, is an easy person to work with, and you'll start to see things gravitating towards you. I hope that helps in some way. Developing a newly formed brand ambassador program, and can I share some best practices when it comes to reporting structure? Yeah, so again, this is going to differ between different companies. It works well, the structure that we have, in that the brand ambassadors report directly into their brand managers. It keeps them very tight to the agenda of every brand, or the brand plan and the objectives of the brand, the messaging of the brand. And then we have this mentorship from me, which is essentially a dotted line, so that I can encourage and advise and provide empathy and jump in where needed, so that theoretical plans actually make sense in the real world, because that's often the empathy gap that you see in corporations, where you have excellent marketers in an office environment coming up with really brilliant, clever plans. And then you have the ambassador who's out in the field, who sees it all and has this intuition that can't often be backed up, but is very valuable. So that kind of mentor, which is my role, aids that and facilitates that, kind of connects the dots. So you can have a brand ambassador manager. That's another route to go, where all the brand ambassadors report into one person. But that person would then need to be very tightly connected with each specific brand, because otherwise you lose sight of what the brand's trying to achieve. And as much as you might not know from some brand ambassadors' Facebook pages, it is all about the brand and not necessarily just about the ambassador. So sticking tightly with the brand agenda, I think, is paramount. I hope that helped. Would you advise a starting brand ambassador who has no bartending experience to go out and get some, perhaps for one night a week, a month, or something like that? Yes, absolutely. In fact, I know some great brand ambassadors who started in this industry with zero bartending experience and were worried that that would hold back their credibility. And in some cases it did at first. And they jumped in and said, right, I'm going to go bartend, once a week at my local bar, or even at one of the best bars in whichever city they lived. I think it does two things. One, it gives you the skills that you can understand mixology better and probably contribute to your brand's drink strategy better. But secondly, it shows that you want to know more about brand ambassadors, so you want to understand what bartenders go through, and therefore you're going to have more empathy for them. So instead of, the cliche of brand ambassador X walks into a bar and says, here's my brand, do this with it, you start to be able to think like a bartender, and you can relate to them and they'll respect you for it. I don't think there's any shame in not being the best bartender in the world at all if you're a brand ambassador, but having a respect and an understanding for the skill is definitely very important. It certainly helped me, and I think if you look around, most good brand ambassadors have some degree of bartending experience, or at least an appreciation, respect, and empathy for that. So absolutely, if you're starting out, I think it's a great idea. It's also a very fun job, so you should enjoy it too. But yes, it'll really help you understand the mindset. In fact, sometimes when I do events and guest bartend or do a bartending shift in a bar occasionally, you get right back in that feeling and you're like, oh, this is what these guys go through, and I've forgotten about that, and the challenges of dealing with guests sometimes over a long period of time. It just, your empathy tank gets filled all the way back up again, which is only a positive thing. And it gives you better ideas on what type of events to throw for bartenders, or even what POS to make for bartenders, because you're right back in that mindset. So the answer to your question is yes. Just want to finish on a couple of thoughts about, what we specifically look for an ambassador. The first impression that you make is so important, because essentially we are sending you out to the world to make first impressions to everyone that you meet. So if things don't click immediately, it's very hard to actually believe that they will click going forward. So the first impression you make is crucial. You need to kind of have that inherently. It's about charisma, good balance of charisma, confidence, knowledge, and vulnerability, which is a tricky balance to have. It's also about work ethic and attitude, and storytelling in particular. We're painting pictures for people a lot of the time. We're inviting them into a world, especially when you talk to journalists. So it's that ability to be charming, tell stories, know your stuff, and be able to convey it in a very engaging way to any number of different people and audiences, and multitasking too. Once we kind of see that you have those skills or characteristics, what we're specifically looking for is brand fit or brand embodiment. Like I said, we truly believe that a great brand ambassador truly exudes their brand. So if you think of someone like Jim Ryan and Hendrick's Gin, I mean, you can't truly separate the two. The personality, the characteristic, the sense of humor, it's just very tight and tied in and really, really works. So that's something that specifically we look for. And sometimes it's an X factor, it's a gut thing, it's an intuition. It's, we know the brand so well. So when someone new kind of walks in, sometimes it's like, wow, yes, this person could really do this. Or other times it's like they check all the boxes, but it's just not there. So that's why you really need to choose a brand that you truly love and align yourself with, and then just explain it. Passion always comes through. Nobody has to be perfect. There are definitely things we can train, but it's all those intangible kind of characteristic, attitude, work ethic type things that we look for that possibly can't be trained. So I hope that's helpful. I want to thank everyone who chimed in with the questions very much. I hope that I have answered your questions. If anything is still out there that I didn't see, feel free to send me a message on Facebook, or follow up through the Tails infrastructure. I'd be happy to answer your questions. Otherwise, thank you so much to Candice, and of course to Anne at Tales of the Cocktail for having me on. This is an important topic. It's exciting. It's growing all of the time. And I, for one, certainly welcome as many new great brand ambassadors in the field as possible. So thank you all very much from HQ here. I wish you all a very good day. So thank you.